I know how unbelievable this sounds, trust me. You guys can accuse me of being a troll all you want, but I'm telling the truth in its entirety and hope that you guys can keep an open mind and suspend your belief for just a little while. Now, before I start, I just want to say that I'm not mentally ill, nor do I have a family history of mental illness. The only medication I have ever taken in my life is aspirin, and I wasn't on anything during that time. I drank regularly during this time, but I didn't do drugs. Trust me not doing drugs in the 80s is the most believable thing in this story. However, this event was not a product of my drinking. I refuse that theory, because I couldn't have hallucinated this guy for a month. I couldn't have imagined my friends talking and hanging around with this guy for a month, and the same goes for me. Back in the late 1980s, I would say 1987 or 1988, I joined the band that regularly played in bars around the city in which I lived. I know the singer fairly well because we'd gone to school together. I know the drummer and the keyboardist very well. We were looking for a guitarist because the last one we had was lousy, and we found one during a night of bar hopping. To this day, I remember everything about this guy, right down to his scar. I remember his name, Nicholas Mayer. He was from England. He had black hair but was already growing it gray, despite not even being 18 years old yet. He was skinny and of average height. I remember that he was pretty deep into doing mind-altering substances and that he smoked constantly. Nicholas had a talent that was comparable to professional guitar players, and considering that we were a bunch of amateurs, that was pretty great for us. I remember that he didn't talk a lot about his family, but he was an only child and had moved to the States just a few weeks before we had all met. For the next month or so, we became a pretty tight group of friends. Nicholas was very quiet and very strange, though he chalked it up to him doing these mind-altering substances and just being odd in general. We practiced together, and we were hanging out on a daily basis. We were just like any other group of friends. But then one day, I woke up, did my normal routine, and went to the drummer's parents' house, which was where we practiced. But Nicholas wasn't there. And since he was usually the first one there, I asked where he was. "Who's Nicholas?" was my only response when I asked. None of my friends remember Nicholas. None of them could recall the guy who'd been playing guitar for our band for the last month. I looked through every single picture that was taken of the group around that time, but for some reason Nicholas wasn't there. I looked through the band van, which was where the instruments were kept the previous night, but Nicholas wasn't there. None of the bars we went to could remember Nicholas either. 2 women whom he'd slept with remembered him. I didn't have a phone number nor an address, but Nicholas was homeless, but frequently hung out at our apartment to shower and to practice and eat. There's obviously records of people with that name online, but none of them are the Nicholas that I hung out with, whom I pranked people with, whom I rocked out with. He was a really special guy, both physically and mentally, and nobody could have forgotten somebody that special that easily, except they did. I've always ran into issues when voting. Before 2020, I would vote in person, and whenever I showed up to the polls, they seemed to never have my information. I chose to vote by mail this year, and I wanted to check today if my ballot had been counted, so I tried to track my ballot, but I kept getting an error message. I decided to double-check my voter status, so I typed my name, date of birth, driver's license number, and the last 4 of my social security and personal information, my address, and the county that I live in, and everything came up to be wrong. I found this information out after 5 p.m., and I couldn't call my county because they were closed, so I decided to do some digging of my own. I used the information of this other girl on my voting status, her county, and her email, which happened to be a college email, and quickly found the girl with the same name as I had. I messaged her, and this is where things get a bit weird. We started confirming our information, and we had the same first name and last name, no middle name, same birthday and year born, and we both have a silver Toyota. My boyfriend was apprehensive that this might be a scam and told me to make sure that she was legit, so I decided to check out if we have any mutual friends, and I found out that we were both friends with a girl named Tina. I knew Tina because I shared a room with her my second year in college during the summer, and I told her how I knew Tina. Then my doppelganger mentioned that she was her cousin. In fact, my doppelganger tried to file a complaint in 2018 saying that this is not the correct information, and when she talked with a rep to clarify her identity, the rep mentioned that we have the same car and a similar social security number. It was the strangest thing ever, and it made me think that I was living in the Twilight Zone. And then I said to myself that I need to get rid of my doppelganger before she sends me to a mental institution and takes over my life. I also thought about the fact that for the past 8 years, I've been eligible to vote, but now I wonder if my votes counted at all, if there was a second person who was nearly identical to me and had identical information, were all my votes thrown out. It's really freaky and kind of makes me think twice about the kind of world we live in. This is not nearly as weird or as frightening as some other Glitch in the Matrix stories that I've read, but it's still very unsettling to me. One night when I was in my late teens or early 20s or something like that, I went to visit a new guy that I had just started dating. I was invited over to meet and have dinner with his parents, who he still lived with at that time. I was surprised when he gave me the address to see that they lived way out in the woods, like the last half mile to their house was really just a rough, rocky road, and they were probably about 2 miles from their nearest neighbor and probably about 5 miles from the nearest town. The car I owned and drove to their place that night had a crappy radio with some broken knobs on it. It was an older car, an old radio, and I was a broke college student at the time, and really I couldn't afford anything better. As I mentioned, I just started dating this new guy. I don't think he'd ever been in my car yet, so he didn't know that my radio was broken, and this is important to the story, so that's why I'm mentioning it now. Since I live in a suburb near a major city, I used to always lock my car doors. It was something that I always did. So even though they lived way out in the woods, I still locked my car when I pulled up to their house. I went in, met his parents, and we all had dinner. Then he and I sat around and listened to some music for a while before I decided to leave and go back home. At no point were we ever alone in his parents' house. His parents were either with us or in the next room over from us with the door open, and nobody else was there. As I leave, I get into my car, wave goodbye to them, and start heading back down the dirt road. Somewhere on that dirt road, I went to turn on my radio with the broken knob, but to my surprise, there was a new knob on the radio. It was way different from the one that had broken off a month or so earlier. I was shocked and fiddled around with the knob in the dark to try to figure out what in the world was going on. It was then that I noticed it was not only the knob that was different, but the entire radio was completely different. How was this even possible? My car had been locked the entire time. I remember that it was unlocked when I stepped out of the car, and I remember locking it as I went in the house. And nobody out there even knew that the radio was broken, not to mention we'd all been inside the entire evening. When I got home, I did call and ask if they had happened to give me a new stereo, and of course they said no, and thought it was pretty ridiculous that I even mentioned something like that. I made him ask his parents and I'm sure they thought I was a weirdo and crazy, but he confirmed that nobody in the house had gone in and done anything to my car at all. So what are the chances that somebody is hiking deep into the woods, and in their hours they just happen to stumble upon the house and my car and figure out how to jimmy the lock, install a car radio with me that's brand new that they just happen to have with them, and then lock the doors back up and whisk away in the woods somewhere? It's a pretty insane theory, but that's the only thing that I can come up with. Yesterday I was going over to a friend's house that I've been to hundreds of times. We live on the same street, about 2 to 3 miles apart. I literally turned right out of my street onto the main road and drive straight to their house. It's the only house in the area, completely surrounded by farmland. It's got a huge amount of bushes and trees surrounding it to the point that they literally call it the jungle. It can't be missed at all. Here's where the glitch comes in. I'm driving down the road and I come to a curve that I've never seen before, and I just think to myself, what is going on? Am I even on the right road? There's never been a curve there. But anyways, I follow the curve around and end up going around a country block, roughly a couple of miles. I decided to drive back to my house just to be sure I'm on the right road. I get home, grab some beer out of the fridge, and head back out. I drive down the exact same road once again and end up at this curve, and I once again drive around the block. But their house wasn't there. At this point, I truly believe that I'm losing my mind. I look down at the clock and over a half an hour has passed. It would not have taken me anywhere near this amount of time to drive the distance that I have, even with a quick stop at my house. I come to the intersection again and think, I'm going down this road one more time, and then I'm heading home, because I'm losing it at this point. I head down the road again, and lo and behold, there's the jungle in all its glory. There's the house. I pull in and my friends are like, dude, where have you been? And I explained to them what I'd gone through. And it's pretty unbelievable, I know. To them, there's really no explanation for this. And me either. I don't know if I went into the Twilight Zone or something, but I drove directly to the house twice. The only thing within miles, and it wasn't there. I don't know what happened or where I could have gone, and that's what brought me to this forum. I'm thinking that maybe I went somewhere that I shouldn't have. On August 19th of 2014, I was working at my job at a metal plating factory. Metal plating involves submerging the product onto which a plating is to be applied using a series of really nasty chemicals in order to remove blemishes from its surface and make it as cohesive as possible to the plating. My manager noticed that the anode bars on the electrolytic copper and electrolytic nickel tanks were starting to get thick with the precipitants of the tank's chemicals, so he instructed my coworker and I to clean them. Both tanks were approximately 300 centimeters long by 150 centimeters wide by 250 centimeters deep. I took the copper tank as it was a soup of water with about 40 kilograms each of both sodium and copper cyanide at about 50 degrees centigrade. I was growing impatient with removing the buildup from the bars using the long-handled brush, so I foolishly decided to climb on the side of the tank with a putty knife to maximize my leverage. All was going according to plan until I tried to get the section of bars farthest away from me. I leaned over to my maximum extent, moving my center of mass over the gaping maw of poison. I slipped and began to fall face first into what I thought was my certain death. At the point that I was certain that I should have felt the splash and my body be inundated with lethal water, I opened my eyes to find the bath of death was maintaining a distance of about 20 centimeters from me. I looked to my left and right and saw that somehow my hands had grasped two of the A note bars despite my eyes being clenched shut. My coworker saw me suspended awkwardly above the tank and called out, "What the hell are you doing?" The only time I had ever witnessed him express emotion in his otherwise unflappable existence. Unable to gather the composure to respond intelligently, all I could say was that I was falling in, and falling in fast. I don't blindly accept this as an instance of quantum immortality. However, before this event, I vividly remember the local hard rock station frequently playing a song with a chorus. "Here I come with a knife, defying rage against your kingdom built on lies. I'll hunt you down by the whites of your eyes. Don't think I won't dethrone you." Ever since, I've never heard that song or even one of the more remotely similar tunes that I could conceivably have misinterpreted as having those lyrics. Also, the sheer improbability of me grabbing the A note bars without looking still raises my pulse and makes me recoil in anxiety 6 years after the fact. So if I didn't experience quantum immortality, it would seem that I got exceptionally lucky, and coincidentally, a song was pulled from publication.